Assalamualaikum, welcome back. I'm Batrisha Afrina and you are still with me for this special interview with Dr. Maszlee Malik, the chairman of International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies Malaysia, IAIS. On today's conversation, is Islam compatible with democracy? Dr. Maszlee talked about how the divine law, about the how it can assimilate or also alignment of the divine law and also human law, as he mentioned just now that any law by human must be based on the guiding principles. In here, it is based on religion. So going further into that, I would like to further continue reading some stands by the proposition here. This one is from the founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, in which his stance is Islam as not just a religion but also a brand, and one that he believes has been corrupted. So he believes that Islam could be compatible with democracy, but unfortunately it is not. And also the stance mentioned by Bem Habib, the former deputy leader of Reform UK, where he said that whether or not Islam as it is practiced in Britain is compatible with British democracy. So that is his concern. And another one from the Majid Nawaz, according to him, Islam in essence actually can be compatible with Islam. So here seems like it is more on the about the person who practice it, the person who practice the democracy. In here, of course, the leader. So you, Dr. Maszlee,
Yeah.
you know, as someone who used to be minister, I would say one of the high officials in the government, what is your thought on this?
Actually, when you talk about democracy, one should always ask, which democracy are you talking about? Because normally, if you look at what Ben Habib and Jasir, Zuri Jasir, been talking about, they're talking about the Western hegemonic, the Eurocentric base, Western hegemonic, which for them, that is the triumph of human civilization that should be imposed onto others. If you don't adhere to this Western hegemonic, then you're not compatible with democracy. Whether you're Muslims, whether you're Buddhists, whether you are even you're Christians, even whoever you are, if you don't adhere, if you don't submit to the Western values that they perceive, then you're not, and the Western hegemony, then you're not compatible with democracy. So this is where, when I brought my argument, I was sharing my experience, saying that, you know, for Muslims in Malaysia, or at least in Southeast Asia, mainly Indonesia, Malaysia, let we say in Singapore, and many other Muslim countries, I gave an example of Maldives, for example, and Pakistan. The only system, the only political system that we know in this modern period that we thought, that we live with, that could give justice, that could prevent dictatorship from reoccurring, that could prevent any act of injustice, and that could or would lead towards the well-being of the people, is democracy. But that does not mean that democracy must necessarily following the Western hegemony. So I gave an example on how we had elections, we had the separation of powers, and we had a lot of mechanism based on democratic values to ensure the development of the nation and the well-being of the people. So we never knew other than this. But unfortunately, in this modern era, I was explaining in my argument, there are discrepancies in the Western preaching of democracy with what really happening on the ground. So I was quoting the example of the genocide in Gaza.
Yeah.
I said that when the preachers of democracy trying to justify the genocide that been committed by Israel, that itself is going against the democratic value. But again, they turn the table around by saying that those who are going against Israel are undemocratic. So it's not based on the values that democracy trying to bring. Is based on the power. It's based on the hegemony. It's based on what they want us to believe, to kowtow, and to submit ourselves to. So in this case, I think even the UN came out into the picture after World War II, after the calamity that had been brought by Hitler and other dictators in order to bring peace and order. But unfortunately, the same league who came up with a lot of resolutions never been abided by Israel and never been abided by US itself. But for them, they just got away with it. But for other countries, if they're doing a similar thing, or if they stand against in a position to Israel and to this big brother, they would be considered as undemocratic. So that's number three. That's number two. And number three, the Western values itself keep changing and keep developing. So I give you an example on how one of the proponents are taking the example of mocking the prophet.
Yes.
He said that, in Western democracy, we can mock Jesus. We can say anything about Jesus. But according to Islam, we cannot mock Prophet Muhammad. We cannot make fun of Prophet Muhammad.
Yes.
So is it a yardstick of democracy by mocking the prophets and mocking the religion? I don't think democracy is all about mocking religious symbols or the prophets or God. I mean, even in Islam, not only we cannot mock our own prophet, not only we cannot mock our own Quran, we are not allowed. In Quran prevented us from mocking other religions' gods, other religions' prophets, other religions' belief, because in return reciprocity, those people will mock our prophet, will mock our religion, will mock our God. So I think these are things that those people, because they are really into the Western values and Western hegemony, they're trying to impose that on us. If we disagree with them, if we adhere to our values, then we are undemocratic. We are incompatible with democracy. So it's very unfair. And I mean, to be honest, apart from the mocking of the prophet and the mocking of religion, most of the time they're saying that, okay, if we couldn't agree with this gender or the woke culture, you're not democratic. What is this? That's one thing. But again, when you're talking about democracy, like I reiterated many times, it is to prevent any act of injustice, any act of despotism, to deter any dictator from coming to power. Apart from that, it is to render the power to the people and to give the people their rights to self-determine what is the best for themselves. But again, it must not be separated from the values that they strongly adhere to.
So here the Western values, right?
Yeah, for Muslims, it's Muslim values. For the Eastern people, the Eastern values. For the people in China, the Confucius and the left idea that they adhere to. I mean, it depends on the countries. Yeah.
And very interesting you mentioned that about the Western democracy. Let's go a little bit international here. For example, in a country where the Muslims are the minority, right? But they have the MPs from the Muslims, and this is an imaginary situation. For example, if they were to vote, for example, like drinking alcohol law related, or something that related to LGBT. So here, I've read some reading, and they say that should Islam or Muslim participate in democracy itself. So in this situation, should the Muslim MPs vote for it? Because if not, what if they go isolated from the other MPs, or even with the institution itself? So where's your thought on that?
Democracy itself is about freedom. freedom of speech, freedom of for you to express your opinion and thoughts. So for the MPs, when they were about to vote, there are two things that they should put in their mind. Number one is a collective responsibility. If they belong to a certain party that are pushing for certain bills, which is to promote those kind of values that you mentioned earlier, it's up to them. They can choose to vote based on the idea of collective responsibility, but they need to answer before God in the hereafter, or they can choose to abstain. I mean, that's the essence of democracy itself. I mean, they can choose not to come, or they can leave the hall. I mean, that happened to many MPs who disagreed with their party. Yeah. But normally they won't go for, voting against their own parties. Okay, that's number one. And number two, I mean, they are free to debate in the parliament, because parliament give the immunity to the MPs to express their thoughts, to express their ideas. So this is where, as Muslims, whichever party they belong to, should, or when the bill that is promoting or legislating the legitimacy of those values that you mentioned earlier, that for us contradicting with our belief, Muslim MPs are free to debate that bill. They are free to express their thoughts. But when it comes to voting, we go back to my initial argument, saying that they can choose either, if they choose to vote for it according to collective responsibility principle, but they need to put in their mind they're going to be stand before Allah during the Mahshar Day to explain their case, or they can choose to abstain.
So if they abstain, would it be undemocratic because it goes against the rights to vote?
No. I think freedom not to vote is also being guaranteed by democracy. Choosing to abstain is part of democratic system, and because if you're forcing somebody, then it's not democratic. But again, according to Westminster system, if you are not voting, if you're not towing the line of your own party, then you'll be disciplined within the party. They have their own mechanism on how to discipline the dissent voice within one's party. I mean, that's part of democracy.
Going back a little bit on you mentioned about, I would just summarize it as like Western democracy. How do you think that the Western secular model of democracy differ from the versions that we are practicing, especially as Islamic nations here in Malaysia? Can these two models coexist or influence each other?
I would like to ask you, is there any difference between the Westminster system in the UK and the presidential system in the US?
I think yes.
Yes, definitely. Is there any difference between the Westminster system and the democracy that been practiced in Scandinavian countries?
Yes.
Yes, and there are a lot of differences you could find from one country to another. That is democracy. Democracy is not a straight jacket that you must follow,
It's like template
strictly.
model.
There's no such thing. So this is where, when I mentioned earlier, I said that whatever type of democracy, whatever type of mechanism which was based on democratic principles in governance, at the end of the day, it will goes back to the guiding principles that have been adhered by the people of certain country, of certain nations. Because everybody has their own history, everybody has their own background, and every country has their own uniqueness. And sometimes we talk about. I remember talking to people from from certain Arab countries. They have no democracy in their country, but their country prosper more than any other Arab countries who are practicing democracy. Who, unfortunately, some of them are in a very bad situation due to let me say, the handicapped democracy that they are having. So for them, the most important things is well-being of the people, the good governance of the nation, and respecting the tradition that the people adhere to, especially in countries which is small in number, small in size, and not and is very let me say not multicultural. They're homogeneous society in certain Muslim countries. So for them, rather than having problems in fighting for certain positions through the ballot box, it's better for them to continue the culture that they're comfortable with, that they have inherited since centuries, and they had no problem with that. And I still remember talking with them, they said that they have the finest street, the finest buildings in their cities. What should they trade with democratic system that you can see the smelly street of Paris, for example, and the graffiti on all the buildings in some European countries, or the high crime rates of London, the city of London, or the city of New York. For them, they're happy with the way they live with no lowest crime rate, with good GDP, and with the best welfare system that they have in compared to those democratic countries.
And I would like to touch on, as we know Malaysia, right? We are multicultural, multi-race here. So we live here in harmony, and actually Malaysia is one of the best example, I would say, if we were to talk about the democracy, Islam, the relation in Islam and democracy, where we able to practice it harmoniously, successfully. So perhaps to our international audience, can you share with them about how Malaysia or other countries, for example, like Indonesia, other country that practice democracy, Muslim majority democracies, how do we balance between the religious values and also democratic governance, especially when it involves the non-Muslims?
Oh, talking about Malaysia, Malaysia is very unique. I would say that one of the unique countries in the world, or if not the most unique country in the world. We have a multicultural, multi-ethnicities, multi-races demographic, but we try to balance so that we could live together with mutual respect, with love for each other, and with maybe not a shared dream, but maybe not a similar dream or shared dream, but dreams that are not contradicting but complementing one to another. So for me, but Malaysia is still, I would consider it as a young country. And we are not without problems.
Yes.
We have gone through a lot of situations, issues, crises, that whether we like it or not, alhamdulillah, we have managed to thrive beyond it. So one of the formula that we should appreciate, and we should, as citizens, as Malaysians, we should adhere to, is our Rukun Negara. Rukun Negara is not contradicting with Islam.
Yes.
In fact, the one that came up with Rukun Negara was trying to bring as much as possible Islamic values, which is considered as universal, then can be accepted by Malaysians, without even saying that, okay, this is Islam. But trying to bring as neutral as possible, as objective as possible, to be accepted by our Malaysians. But unfortunately, Rukun Negara is not being, let me say, dihayati sepenuhnya by Malaysians. And it is timely for us to keep reminding our younger generation to revisit and to live with the spirit of Rukun Negara. If we read the preamble of the Rukun Negara,
Yes.
and the content of Rukun Negara, it's very Islamic, it's very universal, and it's very Malaysia in nature. And if we, all Malaysians, regardless whether we're Muslims or non-Muslims, trying to live within the spirit, within the soul of Rukun Negara, I think we could in the coming days, in the coming years, shaping our nation in a better position and sharing the prosperity of the nation and sharing the dreams that we all aspire for the nation.
Mm-hmm. And Doctor, I'd like to touch a bit on the debate, because in it you mentioned about democracy, while not perfect, can be compatible with Islamic principles, and this raises an important question. If flaws in governance stem from the people who run it, how can we ensure that the future leaders are better aligned with Islamic values and principles? So here I believe we should talk about through the perspective of education system.
Okay, one of the namus, or the law of nature that we're living with, or in Quran they're calling it sunan al-tadafu, that when there are flaws, there are mistakes, there are, let me say, wrongdoings that have been committed, there will always come an action to correct it. Okay, that happens not only in human life but also in democracy. So this is where, if you see the different version of democracy, the different version of political system that try to bring the democratic principles on their soil, it was based on this dialectic process, corrective process. We did something, and happened to be there's a lot of flaws. We tried to correct it, improvise it, improve it, and try to move forward. And again, it's not perfect. So you try to perfect it. The evolution of human, let me say, experience in political system, in democracy, is rather invaluable. So this is where Islam comes in. Islam provides with the values, the guiding principles. Justice, trust, benevolence, and all those sorts of things. Karamah insaniya, the idea of equity. So all these things would never change, and all these values would help us to enhance the corrective measurement on any flaws that happen while we are exercising our rights, exercising our responsibility within the democratic system that keep evolving itself. So, what was the question again? I forgot.
So, how can we ensure that future leaders are better aligned with Islamic values and principles?
Oh, yeah. If you still remember, we did talk about it during our first interview, when I mentioned that in 2019, June 2019, the Minister of Education, KPM, launched Pendidikan Civic, civic education across the curriculums, across the co-curriculum and extra curriculum. So we tried to bring in civic values. We tried to bring in civic education, in which part of it is Islamic values that could be understood as universal values by many. You know, respecting the elders, preserving marwah or dignity, preserving the cleanliness and tidiness of your surrounding, preserving the environment, ESG or whatever people are talking about it, is part of the integral values that being thought by this Pendidikan civic. I'm not sure what happened to it now. It has been 5 years and it's going to be the 6 years where it's still being practiced in our schools. I hope that it's still there, because my children, most of them are in the universities and not in Sekolah Kebangsaan. So I hope government school still adhere to it. At the tertiary level, we made 2 subjects compulsory. Number 1, philosophy, and number 2, ethics. And what I've been told, those 2 topics are still being taught in many universities, including private universities. So that's part of effort that I really encourage the government to continue and to enhance it, in order to produce not only a democratic citizen, not only good citizen, but citizen who is functioning not only to himself and his family, but also to the nation, and contributing towards the sustainability and the maintenance of peace throughout the world.
Inshallah. And as we are reaching the end of this conversation, Doctor, what is your final say, especially if you look at the challenges in democracy such as corruption, inequality, and also moral decay?
Alhamdulillah, in this Kerajaan Perpaduan Unity government led by our Prime Minister, Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, he has introduced, or the government has introduced, the Madani agenda. The Madani agenda, I would say, is very democratic in nature, is very ESG in nature, it is very Islamic in nature, but yet it carries a very universal meaning to it. Madani is not some kind of Islamic agenda to be imposed on every citizen of Malaysia, although it refers to not only to Islamic values but also to other ideology and other religious faith values, which is universal, to bring our country to the next level. We no longer want to be in the league which is being labeled as developing. We want to put ourselves at the same stage as developed nation, but while maintaining our identity, our principles, our values, and our beliefs. So, please, try to understand the Madani agenda, try to live with Madani agenda. It's for betterment, it's for the well-being of the people, and it's not only a mere political agenda. It's for us, all Malaysians.
Thank you very much, Doctor. So that was, I would say, an enlightening sharing from Dr. Maszlee Malik on today's conversation. Is Islam compatible with democracy? And in his sharing, he shares about the challenges of implementation, especially if we talk about it in the diverse context, and also how can Islamic governance can coexist and also even thrive within democratic systems, especially if you look at here in Malaysia. So a huge thank you to Dr. Maszlee for sharing his wisdom and insight on today's conversation, and we hope that his sharing can be inspiring and also beneficial for you to better understand about the democratic system in Malaysia, and especially how can we as citizens can better be involved in it. With that being said, if you'd like to share your thoughts or even to share your opinion on today's matter, you can leave it on the comment section of this airing on our Facebook and also on our YouTube, or you can simply leave a message at our WhatsApp at 011-29004004. So be sure to tune in to us next week for more conversation. Stay tuned to IKIM FM. Inspirasi